YouTube was the amateur boys and I'm back with another one. In this video, we got Gervonta Davis's trainer says black fighters don't sell when they fight against each other. Now, obviously, shout out Dante for making this video. This is a racial tension type of video. It's just nonsense. A lot of the biggest fights in this sports history is between black guys. Mike Tyson, Holyfield. I think Mike Tyson, Lewis. Mike Tyson Jones. Floyd Mayweather, he got a lot of top 10 versus Mexicans. Errol Spence versus Bud is huge. Uh, it's just so many fights. Errol Spence, Sean Porter, Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, Ugaz, Sean Porter. I can keep going on forever. Muhammad Ali, Foreman Frazier, Frazier Ali, 1, 2, and 3. The Thriller in Manila. Come on, bro. Let's stop the nonsense. Let's get it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So, with all this talk of a possible fight with Gervonta Tank Davis versus Shakur Stevenson, right now, realistically, in terms of fights that can really come to fruition, it's the biggest fight that can be made in the sport of boxing today. But Calvin Ford has claimed in multiple interviews that Shakur is not the biggest fight because two black fighters fighting against each other doesn't sell. In one of these interviews, Kenny Ellis and Calvin Ford, they do the interview together, and they're asked who they want to see Gervonta Tank Davis fight next. Now, you would expect them to be on the exact same page for obvious reasons, but that wasn't the case at all. Kenny Ellis said right away, I want to see Gervonta fight Shakur Stevenson because that's the biggest fight that can be made. And Calvin Ford, he keeps saying, nah, that's not the biggest fight. People keep saying that, they go back and forth. Kenny is saying, well, this is the fight that the fans want to see. And Calvin, he keeps saying that's not the biggest fight. So when Calvin said that, I think everyone had the question in their mind. Okay, well, if Shakur is not the biggest fight, what fight would be bigger than that? Because I know that's what I was thinking as I'm listening to this interview. And finally, Kenny, he asked the question, what fight would be bigger than a Shakur Stevenson fight at 135? And Calvin Ford, he couldn't answer the question. But he kept saying that's not the biggest fight. And this is when Calvin, he ended up doing another interview where once again, he said Shakur Stevenson is not the biggest fight for Gervonta Tank Davis. Why? Because two black fighters fighting against each other does not sell.
Is always the forefront of social media. You know what I'm saying? Again, sometimes when I say something, they misunderstand. You know what I'm saying? Like, they keep saying Shakur is the biggest fight. No, he's not. You understand what I'm saying? Because in history, going back looking at Floyd days, when he fought an African American fighter, the money don't generate it. We just seen two of the hottest fighters in the world fought against each other. They couldn't even outdo Tank and Garcia fight.
That is what you call disinformation. And I'm going to prove that with irrefutable facts. Let me start by saying this. There is no doubt about it, boxing is a tribal sport. And race definitely sells. No doubt about that. I always tell you guys that boxing is based on race, nationality, and pride. So whenever you get two big names, right, or two undefeated fighters, and it's a black guy that's involved fighting against someone who's not black, yeah, that's definitely going to do good numbers. But if you have two fighters that happen to be black and they're the two best fighters in the world, then that's going to do very big numbers as well. And the stats prove this. Let's take Errol Spence, for example. When Errol fought against Mikey Garcia, the fight did 360,000 pay-per-view buys. And just understand this, at this time, Mikey Garcia was not only undefeated, but he was on almost everyone's pound-for-pound list, at least every old media member's pound-for-pound list. And the fight did 360,000 pay-per-view buys. And remember, that fight was about 5 or 6 years ago, which means there was less free streaming back then. Now, let's look at when Errol Spence fought Danny Garcia. Well, those pay-per-views did 250,000 pay-per-view buys. Now, let's fast forward to more recent time, where it seems like the majority of fans watch their fights on free streams. Even Errol Spence himself admitted that he watches fights for free on his Fire Stick. So what kind of pay-per-view buys did the Spence versus Crawford fight do? Around 700,000.
Wow. Headshot, perfect timing. Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford's biggest fights were both against each other. Terrence Crawford fought a lot of other races. Errol Spence fought a lot of other races. Most of the other races that Terrence fought were European, Eastern European. Most of the other races Errol fought was Hispanics, Latinos. But when they combined with each other, it was the biggest fight of their career. So Coach Kelvin uses this as an example. It's terrible because this was the biggest fight of both of their careers. If he tries to compare it to Tank versus Ryan, those guys are literally two of the biggest stars in the sport. Of course, they're going to sell like crazy. That don't mean that him versus Shakur or him versus Devin, him versus Shakur and Devin is the biggest fight outside of Ryan. It's ridiculous. Ain't nobody else outselling those guys at that weight class, at those weight classes. It's ridiculous.
Doubling what Spence did when he fought against Danny Garcia and Mikey Garcia. It's because the best were fighting the best. When Oscar De La Hoya fought Shane Mosley, they did 950,000 pay-per-view buys. When Floyd Mayweather fought Shane Mosley, two black fighters fighting against each other, they did 1.4 million pay-per-view buys. In fact, before Floyd Mayweather broke all of the pay-per-view records, before the Mayweather era, all of the pay-per-view records was held by two black fighters fighting against each other. So to go back to what Calvin Ford said when it comes to Gervonta versus Shakur Stevenson, without a doubt, there is nobody that Gervonta can fight at 135 that would even come close to generating the type of numbers that a Gervonta Tank Davis versus Shakur Stevenson fight would. And that's obviously not up for debate. Even the most racist boxing fan would agree with that. And the reason why it's the biggest fight right now is because they are the two biggest names at 135 and they're the best at 135. Now, the only fight that would be bigger than Gervonta versus Shakur would be Gervonta versus Naoya Inoue. But Inoue doesn't fight at 135, and he's not going to move up to 135 anytime soon. He's not even planning on moving to 126 anytime soon. So I'm going to wrap this video up by saying this. For all you guys that go out there and you want to interview these fighters, don't allow these fighters to spread disinformation without fact-checking them. Because athletes are not allowed to do that in any other sport. They're not allowed to just make stuff up in an interview without the reporter saying anything about it. Just like the many times I interviewed Abel Sanchez. And every time I interviewed Abel Sanchez, I would check him on every single lie that he would make. When he tried to defend his fighter Golovkin for avoiding Andre Ward by using the excuse that black fighters don't sell, I had him looking completely foolish. And I didn't have to disrespect him. I just hit him with facts that he could not refute. And he had to damn near backtrack everything he said. If you're going to interview these fighters and these trainers and everyone else, hold them accountable for spreading disinformation. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Till next time.